we're doing a roundtable discussion that is focused on improving your safety return. And I think we should just start with some introductions so that we all know who we are. And my name is Brian Padgett. I'm a managing attorney at Employer Solutions Law, and my role today is just to sort of moderate and help all these brilliant people to my left say all the cool stuff that they know in their heads.
Hi, I'm Saybr Erickson with Kemly Electric. I do safety and HR.
I'm Erica George, Haggard Electric. I'm their safety director. I'm also vice chair of the safety committee here at ABC. So thank you for joining my event. Don't worry, I'm really safe. Don't judge right now.
The safety moment is with twice for motorcycle.
Yes.
I'm Amanda Grindle. I'm with Saybr Contractors. I'm their vice president and safety officer. We are a GC out of Tacoma.
And I'm Dale Sharp. I'm the safety manager for Skis Painting Incorporated down in Renton, Washington.
Adam Kemly, Kemly Electric. I'm a VP, soon to be owner of that company. And we are a safety conscious organization. So there you go.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
That you're safety conscious. Otherwise, you're in the
We're
wrong
small.
world.
So we're like, we are one of those who are getting a lot out of events like this and are ones who want to, you know, improve and maybe formalize this a little bit more as we get bigger and more mature.
Well, and
Well, that's perfect.
yeah, that's exactly what we're here to talk about today, because really the first thing that I wanted to ask the group is about culture, a safety culture, and how do you create a safety culture and then cultivate it so that it stays safe and front of mind. So in your experience, you know, how as a starting point, how do you identify any weaknesses in your safety culture, just as a start? What tools do you use? What experiences have you had in seeking out and identifying any perceived or actual weaknesses in your safety culture?
I'll start.
Okay.
Well, as a safety manager, when I started at Haggard, I had no clue what my guys did, right? Or how to keep them safe when it came to electrical work. I knew how to keep people safe. I just, as a GC, like working for GCs and things like that. But as a subcontractor in the electrical industry, it opened my mind to how do I better myself to keep them safe. So I got my apprenticeship card, or trainee card, I should say. And went out in that field, started learning, because they would always get upset when I was like, you have to do it this way because the way you're doing it's unsafe. They're like, you can't. I'm like, yeah, you can. So every time they'd say that to me, I'm like, maybe they're right. So I'll go out there, I'll do the work, I'll train, I'll learn it. And that's what got the buy-in on safety with my team. And they were right, you couldn't. So I had to think outside the box, learn, come up with ideas that will keep our guys safe. So that's what I did to better our safety program in order to understand it.
Excellent. So actually getting your hands dirty, getting out there and doing the work so that you can understand the way it's done, so that you can identify how it can be done more safely, but still practically speaking. I think that's an excellent point, because too often, or maybe not too often, but often enough, you know, especially if we're interacting with like the Department of Labor and Industries, they're like, nope, this is what the rule says, that's it. And it's like, well, okay, that's fine if you're sitting behind a desk, but you've got to be able to communicate how to do things safely in a way that the people are actually going to do it. Otherwise, it's just words on paper. So that's excellent, America. Thank you. Dale, I think you raised your hand.
Well, I was just going to mention that coming to events that ABC puts on was a big benefit to me when I first was asked to be the safety coordinator at Skis Painting. And I kind of fell into this accidentally, but the nuggets that you get from surrounding yourselves with people who are smarter than you are invaluable. Can't say enough how positive that's been.
And to add on to that, safety is so collaborative. I always tell my guys, if you're expecting our safety program to rely on me, it's not going to work. It's not going to be effective. It has to be a collaborative approach. I can't be the safety police. We all need to work together to implement safe practices in the field. Otherwise, it's not going to be a safe culture.
Yeah, it's not just a matter of people at the top, but we try to make it, even though we don't have an official, we're small, we don't have an official safety manager, but we try to, our motto is make safety easy. So make sure every van is stocked with the right items, make sure that we're talking about it often, and then make it easy for the guys to feel like it's okay when something happens. With David was saying, 542 days accident free in the sawmill, baloney. When something happens, that people feel good about taking care of it in the right way.
Yeah, and then we learn from it. That's the other thing I always say is safety is a process of learning. We're all on this journey together. We're always trying to be safer than we were. So it's not something where it's, we're not trying to keep it all the same all the time. We're always trying to be safer, find better ways, easier ways to do things.
And the safety person can't be or they can be the driver of it and the consistent person, but they can't be the only person. Everybody in the company has to have the same passion towards safety, and it's definitely from the top down. I like doing job site observations with the president and vice president, because then they see that, okay, it's important to everybody. Unfortunately, I spend a lot of my time in the office because I do other things, but every day I wear my steel-toed boots. I'm sitting behind a desk with steel-toed boots because I want to show that I have the proper gear on if I need to go out there at a moment's notice to the job sites.
Well, on that point, how do you, and this is a question for the group, what have been your experience in getting leadership, ownership to buy into safety? So to have, ownership, management, do safety walkarounds with you, that didn't just happen overnight. How did you get that buy-in? What tools and tactics have you utilized in the past to get management engaged in safety?
Depending on where you're working, sometimes
Sure.
you need to, it's the bottom line. David talked about that. How much can you save by being safe? Yes, there's some investment with gear and those kind of things, but you save a lot of money being safe. Sometimes you just pick a couple people, like who's the leader out in the crews that have a passion for it, and just grow it from there. And if people see that you're consistent and you have a passion, you kind of get a following that everybody's going to start doing the same thing.
Yeah, I put all our management field guys through OSHA 30. Because they kept saying, oh, why do we have to know that? That's dumb, right? So once they sat in that class for 5 days, they started to realize, like, I'm not just saying it, there's a reason behind it, right? And then just having them walk with me and me explaining, it's all about how you approach it, right? Like if you come off like cocky or ignorant, they don't want to listen. They're just like, whatever, you're just a safety person, nobody likes you, right? But if you do it in a way that you can explain it and not just say, well, my book says, they hate that. If you say, well, the book says, they don't want to hear it. So if you explain it and bring it down to like, listen, I'm not trying to be the police. I want you to go home, because the last thing I want is to call your family and say, we lost you today, right? So they started thinking the way I think, right? And of course, obviously I got their buy-in just by being out in that field with them. So I make sure that when they start, I wear my PPE at the office as well, just in case I have to run to the job site, but the buy-in and how I got them to walk with me was simply just explaining and why I look at it in a different perspective, why I'm always thinking, well, this can happen at any given time, right? So this is why I make you guys do your pre-task plans every morning. Because if you don't have that guy, then we're behind on units, right? So if we do this for 5 minutes for our units, walk them really fast, see what's gonna cause an injury, write it down, fix the situation, you're good for the rest of the day, right? And clean up after yourself. So they started realizing that, like, okay, she is just not poking at us, it's for a reason.
And if you see someone like America walk in with a cast, right? Okay, we didn't do that to her, but think of, she's on your job site and you ended up, something you failed to do or something that you weren't pushing them to do, task plans or whatever caused this. How would that make you feel? Those things there, when something happens, it makes you think, oh.
I would hope they want to cater to me.
Other thoughts on getting ownership, leadership, buy-in on safety cultures?
Keeping it front of mind and talking about every opportunity you get, I think is a big thing. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. It's gotta be spoken. You gotta keep the discussion going. Otherwise it can just get pushed into a crack and you're not focused on. Bring it, talk about it, talk. Take every chance you get.
Reminding leaders too. I mean, if you work in a multi-generational family business, hypothetically, theory, that maybe started out of the back of a pickup truck, that would also take you to school some days. There's certain things that are continuous from that time that maybe could or had the opportunity to develop into bad habits. But if you're lucky, you have leaders who realize that they're not experts in everything. They surround themselves with people who are. And it's, I think, the responsibility of those people to remind owners and to remind executives why safety is important. And then when the rubber meets the road and something does happen and somebody slips on a roof, but they were wearing their fall gear, or something falls off a lift and it bonks them in the hard hat, and they were there taking time to say, well, let's assess the situation, but then also take stock and say, this is why we do it. Here's a real world example that happened on your job site, and have the executives deliver that message. So then again, it comes from that top down. That's it.
We've been talking a bit about how to identify gaps in the in a safety program. And when we were all talking and discussing today, one of the things that came up was a STEP. You're all familiar with STEP. Does one of you want to sort of talk about, because one of the things that we're here to do today is to let folks know what tools are available to them. Because one of the things that I think is really neat about safety professionals is their willingness to share and the collaborative nature of the work that they do. It's somewhat unique in that you're very rarely going to find somebody who's going to covet their good ideas. Safety people want to share them. So whether you're an experienced professional with 20 years of safety under your belt, or you're somebody who's like, well, I guess I'm going to figure it out because my boss told me to, there are tools available to you. So let's talk about STEP as a jumping off point.
What you just said about the boss told me, I'm going to do that. That's kind of where I found myself. And so fortunately, a great reputation, a great relationship with the ABC Retro Group. So I was steered up here and I started sitting in this room and listening to people talk about the STEP program, it's a safety training evaluation program. And what it did for us was allowed through this, I think at that time it was 20 key components, now it's grown a bit.
Well, can you tell us what it is, the STEP program?
Yeah, it's a list of criteria that you use to judge or rank your own company's involvement of these different leadership or what's some of the other categories?
It's
Safety
practices.
toolbox talks,
Yeah.
how often are you, basically gives you a way to measure your program.
Yeah, it's all written down. There's steps you can follow, and you can just take a good, honest look at how involved is leadership in our organization. And it's, I don't know, 6 or 8 or 10 different categories in leadership alone, and each one is ranked and scored, maybe 3 points, 6 points, 12 points. And if at the end of the day you get enough points added up, you've got yourself an opportunity to even advance into what they call a safety alliance. But it's those areas where you score a 0 or you score a 1 that help you just identify, hey, this is something that we can do better at. And had it not been for the STEP process, it would have been hard to put your finger on those things.
It's definitely an eye-opening. needs to go through. So that was one of the first things I did when I came to Kemly Electric. Well, you know.
So how do you start that process? How do you, what is it, is it a program? Is it a spreadsheet? What does it look like and how do you do it?
Well, that's when ABC comes into place, right? Like, especially if you're a member, you run to ABC and they walk you through it, right? So then you get Tony or you get a David and you get all of us to help. Well, we walk people through it, and there's literally no form out there that teaches you how to do a site specific, right? Or an APP, like before, right when I started at Haggard, I reviewed our APP and it was probably like this big, right? And I was like, oh, what the heck is this? But there was no way I'm reading through that. But then I started reading through it and I was like, oh, it's just like a generic APP. And that's what people usually have. And they change the wording a little bit here and there, but they still have this book, right? And it's like, you want to tailor that to what you do in your company. So if I'm gonna wear gloves 100% of the time on my job site, I better wear those gloves 100%. Because if OSHA compliance comes out and they decide that they want your APB, they read through it and it states that, I'm getting dinged for that. You can get a fine for it, right? So it's like thinking that way, getting input, like, hey, I think we do it all the time via email. Hey, what do you guys do for this? What's your forklift, safety walk? Do you have a form for that? Can I see your form? Maybe I'm missing something. So it's all about using what you have or what you're in to get other people's knowledge and get help, right? So ABC taught me a ton, thanks to Glenn and Dawn. So that's how I got I knew a lot of it already, but it was like the little things where I was like, ooh, I don't have that. Ooh, 70E, don't have that either. I better get on that. So it's kind of really important to use what you can to get your program to where you want it. And safety at ABC, they have everything for you. If you go to their website, there's a way to go look at toolbox talks that we put in there, things of that nature, so.
Your question, Brian, it used to be on paper, but now it's a link on the website. You get on the ABC's website and it asks, do you want to have a world-class safety program? And if so, click this link to a STEP application. Wade right into it.
In the STEP application, you can fill it out yourself, but it's actually more effective if you ask other people to do it. So I complete it myself. I have the president do it, the vice president do it. And I used to choose a couple different people, a couple journeymen, a couple apprentices, and then this last year I had the safety committee do it. And then I did an average of all the answers, and I made sure that they I asked them underline things that we should be doing and that we're not. So that now we have a list of things we can improve on.
David?
I asked this question to the panel because I've come across a lot when I meet members. And I think it's a good thing to address. How do you attack, so the way I would describe the STEP program is a self-evaluation tool that helps identify areas of opportunity, to make it simplistic. How do you not be overwhelmed when you have, 25 components now, and you have, how do you find the low-hanging fruit? Let's put it that way. How do you find, okay, we're gonna tackle this, and then this, and then this, as opposed to just look at this and go, we suck, I'm overwhelmed, how do we start? I mean, because it sounds like a couple of you started not knowing what the application was, and then it now works through to where you really have a great understanding. How do you go through the process of, well, let's tackle this first, and then this, and then this, and then this, and continue to show, steps of improvement here.
Prioritization is what I'm hearing. How do you prioritize where and
Because
address?
I meet a lot of members like, I'm so overwhelmed, where do I start?
I'd say
I
it's
guess that's a
not,
good,
because the first question is leadership.
Yeah.
You start with the first question. That's probably the biggest one. And then from there, maybe what you got the lowest score in, or, what is something easy that you could grab. But the first couple of questions, I think those are the core questions on that application.
Sarah, you reminded me that we did the exact same thing. You described in bringing different people in from different departments and asking them to fill it out, 3 or 4 at the time. And I think that was a big thing because sitting there and just looking at it as one person, I feel like, whoa,
Yeah.
I'm really on the hot seat
I
here.
get that sentiment a lot. It's like,
Yeah.
how do I tackle this?
Right.
You know, so many of our ABC members are, you know, like Sarah, HR, payroll, safety. And so safety kind of sometimes gets thrown to the side and maybe the training started in the office and they've been given the responsibilities of safety and they just feel overwhelmed. And I love that you guys have mentioned networking. And
Collaborative.
you've got a lot of resources. That's how I learned, is from everybody sitting up in this panel is, you know, get involved and stuff like that. So I love that component, but I know that a lot of our membership that have been given the responsibility of step for the first time feels very overwhelmed with that document and where to start to show improvement of, you know, the prioritizing like Brian said.
No,
The way I started, when I first started doing our STEP program for Haggard, when I, you know, joined with them, and then I was like, did the same thing, like, holy cow, I am missing a few things, right? So I started with the most important one for what we do, right? And I fixed that first. Then I go back, I literally took a screenshot of all of them and then marked them off, which ones I was able to complete by myself, and then take it to my bosses and say, does this work? And then the ones that I knew would affect our team out in the field the most, I'd ask them, like, what can we do for this? What do you think will work for us? And then I'd start with those and mark those off, but it is hard. It is overwhelming. Just get the resources for other people. Like you said, safety people love to help and give you the knowledge for you to succeed as well in a company. Because I always view it as, if I'm on your job site, as a GC, and I'm on your job site, I'm looking out for the GC as well and every employee that's out there. I'm not just there for my team, I'm there for everybody, because it helps everybody.
Another resource that was great for me when I first was starting out in safety. So ABC has safety companies that you can hire to come do a safety visit. And that was just so excellent because you can have them, invite them out to your job site, walk with them. I could learn so much, not just by what they were seeing, but also the way that they interacted. That's where I learned, like, it is really important in safety to ask good questions. More than dictating is to ask somebody a question of how they're doing it, why they're doing it, if there's a different way to do it, because then that's part of laying that baseline of getting buy-in.
So ask, go tell.
Yes.
I've actually had UW, there's a group at UW that will come out for free as well.
Yes.
And my company does really weird stuff, so they love. Yeah, so if you have a very like dry ice blasting when it was new, they're like, ooh,
Yes.
yeah, I wanna monitor, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That reminds me, there is a Alliance program
Yes.
with ABC
Yes.
that they do that too. Tony comes out, reviews everything you have. If your site specific is missing something, he'll mark that down. He'll sit, work with you, get other contacts to help you through it. So there's a whole list that he goes through, and that actually helps you with L&I. You put up that sign that you're in the Alliance program, and they come out to do compliance. If they tell you what they're there for, that's all they can look at. is
Because
what
you've
they're
already
there
been pre-approved basically based on.
Focused inspection. Love a focused.
They
We're gonna have an
they
inspection.
avoid the general inspection if you are a member of safety alliance.
Well, I just, to this, with our superintendents, we encourage them to call L&I out for safety consults.
I was gonna ask, if anybody has experience with consultation.
Yeah.
That puts them front line with L&I to know what they're looking for, what they want, what they're missing, so that they understand the safety culture behind it too. So for us, that's been pretty effective with them, vetting, looking for problems, and then it gets all our guys thinking so that you get the field engaged a lot more.
Yes.
Have you had, have you all had experience with Dodge consultation rather?
Yes, I brought them out for like a specific kind of complicated safety situation so that we can work on it together. That's very effective.
I've had them come to our facility in the past. but also invited them to a job site to deal with a complicated approach to a building facade that had power lines far too close.
So I'm not sure who in the internet or in the room, so Dosh, Wisha, the enforcement aspect of safety for the Department of Labor and Industries, there's two components. There's compliance, and they're the ones who will come out and write a ticket if you do anything wrong. But then consultation comes in, and they will come in and they're not going to write you a ticket, even if they see something bad. But you're on the hook. You've got to fix anything that they point out to you. But so just making sure everybody in the room knows that those are two aspects. And so consultation and compliance aren't even supposed to talk to each other. So like consultation is not supposed to go over and say, hey, you really got to check them out. They're problematic. So they're not supposed to talk to each other. Do they in practice? I don't know, but they're not supposed to. So that's great. I'm glad to hear that you've had good experience with consultation. That's really nice to know.
When you talk about compliance and stuff, I know when I had a meeting with somebody from Olympia in the safety program. They're saying that, especially public works projects, like, you have to have a safety plan, and they'll fine you if you don't have one, it's $10,000. Is that true? Per incident?
No, the way that the Josh will calculate penalties is well, very, very quickly. They assess the hazard, the nature of the hazard, and the probability that the hazard will exist, and that gives them an overall assessment. Basically, to come up with a number between 1 and 6, that starts out with your base penalty, and then based on the size of your company, there may be reductions based on good faith, bad faith, average faith. There may be reductions or additions, and also based on your history of interactions with the department, they can adjust that number. If it's a repeat serious, depending on how many prior serious violations you've had, those numbers can go up. It's willful, it's 10 times as much, but a flat 10 grand for just something is not likely. With Dosh Wisha, typically they take a lot of things into consideration. If it's just a paperwork issue and there's no impact on worker safety, then it'd probably be a general violation with no associated penalty. So that's my very, very quick.
Which is around 3 grand, 5 grand, not very.
So something really important to back up what you said about consultations. It is really important to do those in consultations, in my opinion. I've done it for 12, 20 years. Because as soon as they come on site, they find something, code enforcement, they find something, they're gonna look at all those parameters you just talked about, but they're also gonna look at good faith on, are you doing consultations? That consultation showing a history that this company uses consultation services is a major reduction because you do that. So it is that important.
There are a lot of GCs requiring them now too, yearly. We work with one that requires us to do it on their job every year. So
Have you noticed any increased focus on safety as a result of the changes that were made a few years back to upper tier, lower tier contractor liability under STU?
We've made changes.
Yeah.
As general contractor.
Yeah.
So basically, for those that don't know, so as a general contractor, I am responsible for every employee, like they are my employee on the job site. So for me, in practice, that means when I am hiring subcontractors, I need to have, at a minimum, a very clear outline of what you're doing, what your hazards are, and how you're going to mitigate or eliminate those hazards on my job site. So often I'll get the question like, why do I have to do this JHA thing? I'm like, you hired me to do this, this is what I'm doing. And then I have to explain, I am as responsible for your people as you are. So it is very important that I know what you're doing so that we can work collaboratively together on making sure that your workers stay safe out there. So.
And that's because the state law, like we were just saying, there's the contractor that causes what, the hazard.
I would get that same
contractor.
citation, basically.
Yeah, there's like
Parallel liability.
Parallel
Yeah.
citation.
So if I get a citation for rebar, for example, as an electrical subcontractor, the GC gets
Get the
one,
same one.
the concrete guys get the same one, and then whoever put in the rebar, right? Like it is a trickle effect. Everybody gets it. And if one person doesn't fight it, Ellen, I considers that like, oh, everybody else is liable for this, so if they try to fight it,
Yes.
it's a hard situation.
I will say there are 3 ways, and this is not just for GCs, but for everybody, a good rule of thumb on how to protect yourselves. There's 3 things that I always tell my people. 1, you need to communicate what the safety plan is. So you need to communicate what the hazards are and how you're gonna eliminate, mitigate those hazards. Then you need to inspect to see if those hazards are occurring. And then when you do see them, you need to correct them. So those are the 3 things you have to do, and in every single one of those things, they have to be documented.
Thank you, the lawyer loves
Pictures.
documentation.
And pictures.
So we actually were able to get out of a parallel citation because we had all those 3 things. We had a gentleman who's on a scaffold, who decided to take his paint bucket, and stand on the scaffold to reach that last little part. At the same time, an L&I inspector was
Of course.
whacked up, yes. But we had a tailgate that morning. We talked about scaffolding. We very explicitly said, do not stand on anything while you're on the scaffold. We had previous inspections. We had corrected things with the scaffolding with this particular individual. And then we actually had a correction saying, stop doing this. So because of that, we did not get a parallel citation.
And to that point, I think that it's important to note that these student laws, a parallel citation is not strict liability. It means it's not automatic, it's not compulsory that the department does that. The department has discretion that they can exercise. It is the best time for them to exercise that discretion is with the boots on the ground department inspector who's there on the site. It's a lot harder later to get the appeal through the appeal process. It's a lot harder. It's better to have that, and the things that they look at are exactly what you pointed out and what this gentleman pointed out about experience with consultation. If they're making every effort and really there was nothing more that could be done, then you can encourage the department inspector to exercise that discretion, which is tremendous. Because the GCs have so much exposure because maybe Haggard Electric is on one job site and they have a fall protection violation, not on America's watch, obviously, but that general contractor may have 5 other subs. And if all 5 of those other subs get hit with a fall protection violation, that GC is looking at multiple repeat serious violations that can get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars without exaggeration. So it's very, very important. And it makes sense that GCs are paying attention to this now, and subs should too, because if they haven't noticed it already, and this is a good way to sell to ownership. This is going to help you bid work and get work, because there are now subs who are blacklisting people for periods of time based on a terrible EMR, based on a terrible history with DOSH enforcement. So you can get, that's another tool in your toolbox to get management buy-in, because the department, by making that change, has put a lot of monetary incentive into upper tier contractors when they're looking at their lower tier subs.
And I must say, if DOSH ever comes out to your job site, take pictures, whatever they're taking a picture of, take the same picture. Before they take pictures, as you're walking, take pictures of everything. That will help you during your time of fighting your citation. Document it. Your guys or girls are allowed to have a representative with them when they're being interviewed. They will fight you. Yes.
Yeah.
They will fight you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't coach them. They'll tell you can't, don't look at them, don't make sudden movements or.
And you may want to have a
Highways.
toolbox. Don't make a sudden movement. You can have a toolbox on that
Yeah.
subject. The management, the department is allowed to have, to exclude management
Mhm.
from an interview process, because bad actors would be like, well, you didn't see that, did you? You know, so, but I do find that often there are inspectors who will ask leading or unfair questions rather than investigative style questions, and having another person there minimizes that. So it doesn't eliminate, it does minimize.
Yeah, I have a little pro tip that I used, and we didn't get a citation or anything, but we were doing this lead job, and the guy came to interview, and one of my employees is like, oh, no habla inglés. And like, he probably is gonna be bilingual just because he said that. Anyway, so I had like 8 people on the job site. So I lined them up in who I knew would speak the best and was more like experienced. And so I lined them up and no habla español was, or Inglés was down here. And he kept creeping up the line. But anyway, the guy got tired of interviewing people by the second person. It was really cold outside too, so we're all outside. Anyway, so just having, so didn't coach them as much as I just lined them up in.
Put your best foot forward.
Yeah.
Travis, you got something?
Sure, I just had a comment, something I used to do was real value added with our leadership was actually train our foremen, our leaders on what to do in case of an inspection. And actually, we created a do's and don'ts cheat card that some of you might have, but it's a real nice tool to give, just like we have our qualification operator cards, things like that, for all your leaders to carry, or even just have it in your site safety plan as the first page. And it's all color coded with a green and a red, do and don't.
I like that. I'm gonna steal that, see? I just learned
Right.
something.
And if you ask Travis, he'll give it to you, I guarantee.
Already have
See
a
me
lot,
later.
it's all got a lot of great information, and you can add to it whatever you want, customize it for your firm.
Yeah, I think that's well said in training your leadership. It shouldn't be, well, what do I do when they show up? You're in the headlights. It should be, oh, I know exactly what to do. I'm gonna call America. America's gonna call the code show and say, hey, hold off, I'll be there in 20 minutes, and then we can open. You know, that plan should be in place ahead of time. That's great. Yeah.
I have a quick question for Amanda. Since parallel liability has changed a few years ago, have you changed criteria, minimum requirements, of those lagging indicators that I was talking about, EMR, DAR rate, incident rate? Is there a minimum threshold that you are willing to accept that?
Yes, so if you have an EMR over 1.0, I want to know why, and then have a corrective action plan. It doesn't necessarily mean we can't work with you, but I want to know what are you doing to try to improve it.
And you look at the OSHA documentation
Yes,
stuff as
yeah.
well, the lagging indicators?
Yes, and if you have tons of citations, you might not be able to hire.
Listen, and I look to the past too. If I've seen
Yes.
you change your company.
Yes, that also that's a red
Well,
flag.
that's a point that I didn't mention when I talked about EMRs. EMR is effective for 3 years, right?
Yes.
Your EMR is hard to turn around. Your DART rate, your incident rates are annual. They're
Yes.
calendar years. So you can have an immediate impact on those lagging
Yes.
indicators year over year.
Yes, yeah, and then if you're getting a citation for the same thing over and over.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
hard.
Thanks.
Well, let's pivot a little bit because I'm mindful of time and we had a lot of aspirational, we filled a lot of pages, but we'll get through what we can get through. But one of the things that we talked about was training and your approach to training your people. Consistency in training, I think, was something that came up consistently. Would you talk a little bit about how you approach training and ensuring it's consistent?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's, we're a smaller company, but you'd be surprised how hard it is to communicate across the board with everyone. And it's as simple as making sure, to start, we have a consistent Wednesday safety meeting every single Wednesday, and everyone is included in that. During COVID, we had to convert to Teams, which was actually a little helpful because we could get a roster of who actually showed up and who wasn't there. And then immediately following the meeting, myself or one of my colleagues would talk to those who weren't there, find out what was going on. So it's having that consistency on the calendar to making sure it's there, but then also that follow-up, and then having some sort of format and agenda so that people know you're taking it seriously. So we use ABCs, weekly briefs there to go through it. And then it's important for us to have one of the leaders lead each meeting with some sort of anecdotal story. We have a lot of, generational experience, I'll say, in our team. And so they've seen a lot, and it helps the younger guys understand why it's important. And they start to look forward to it as well, to time for the team to come together. So that's one piece. And then just always bringing it up. Like, I look at going out on a job site, if I'm doing a job start with one of my guys, as an opportunity to try to reinforce something we talked about earlier, even if it's like, the hazards of scaffolding when we're doing crawl space work. I'll say, make sure tilt it, set something up high above this access door, you can fall on your head when you're calling out, something like that, just something that we're always thinking about it. And then as we get bigger, kind of formal, I think, we've seen that the guys are more receptive to having more and more organization around it because they look forward to it.
I think it starts with hiring also. When I do the new hire training, I have a checklist that I go through and I do it. So I know that everybody's getting the same information on their first day. I don't skip over certain things. If, I think that somebody's been in the industry longer than somebody else, I still cover all of the different subjects that I want to cover.
Mine is, I do all the trainings unless I can't, because we're getting really big now, so I utilize so many. But I make sure that we use Procore and Paylocity, and it dings us and tells me, it literally sends me a notification at 3 AM. I don't know why it's at 3 AM, but it does do that. And it tells me who's coming up for retraining, right?
Right.
And then when it's something like lockout, tag out, I go to the job. And every person that's gonna expire and has already done a full class on it, I make them show me how they would do it. And if they put it on properly, because if they can't, then they're going right back to that class, doing it fully, listening. Or if they tell me, I don't know why I put it on there, I just was told I had to. I'm like, cool, all right. Call ABC, you're going to their class now. But it's that consistency, making sure that you keep up to date with their safety training. Like for us, I make sure every person in our company is first aid CPR trained, because your foreman or superintendent that's sitting in the trailer and you're on the 5th floor and the person you're working with has a heart attack and you have no clue what to do, it is critical for that person to get CPR right away, or that AED right away, right? So having somebody that's working next to you that knows what to do in those situations is crucial. So having everybody, because it states that you have to have somebody certified in first aid CPR. But having one person is just not enough on a site. Yeah, have them all. So training is, my guys like it sometimes. I try to make it fun, right? Fun with learning, so hands-on training. Like I keep our old harnesses that never been impacted, right? Nobody's ever fallen in them, but it's been 5 years, so I have to get rid of them. But we use them to do confined spaces, train them how to actually rescue somebody by being rescued. Like, you're about to get rescued from a confined space with our tripod that is no longer in use. Nothing's wrong with it, but it's been 5 years. So I put that harness on them and I have people rescue. They'll learn how to put the tripod up, or learn how to use whatever they need to go in and rescue. Because showing them without using it, they're gonna be like, how'd she tell me to do that? So it's like the hands-on is important too. Sit in the class and reading through a slideshow doesn't help. It's literally giving them full-on training.
More engaged.
Yes.
Yes.
And they find it fun.
Well, there's a lot of nodding heads here, so I mean, sounds like it's pretty consistent across the board.
Having hands-on is so critical. Like, I won't send somebody to a forklift class if it's only online. To me, that makes no sense.
I'm an excellent driver, I put Grindle
Watch this. And I'll get a lot of, well, yeah, I just make this online. Like, the benefit of you actually doing it is so important. And construction's a hands-on thing. You can learn that way, so.
I think that's well said too, and that also identifies folks that are drawn to the trades. You know, a lot of folks that are drawn to these skilled trades are drawn to these trades, they're not, they don't want to spend time in a classroom and read a book. Not that they can't or won't, but there's like, we go towards where our aptitudes lie, right? So hands-on, that's smart. I really think that's smart.
And people that see heavy machinery that they're about to learn, I mean, it's like a kid at Toys R Us. I'm a big kid now, I can use the big boy toy. So it's fun for them. They enjoy it.
Yeah, please.
We do thousands of hours of training a year, and one thing that I would just, with a room full of contractors, it's great to say that. I think the one thing we run up against a lot is people trying to say, well, hey, take this class that might take 4, 5, 6 hours, and can we do it in 2 hours?
Yeah.
And I know that's very critical and important for manpower and man hours and understanding that, we understand that. But that sometimes makes it so we may not be able to get the hands-on part at the end of the class, or truly get every piece that we need to cover. It's still training and it's quality training, but I would just challenge each of us to make sure if we really want this to be effective in practice training, then we are allotting that time and considering it a value within our own company, that we want these folks to be 100% qualified and dedicated to their trade. So just throw that out.
I would just say that goes back to management buy-in, you know, the difference between the 2-hour and the 6-hour course and pulling people off of job sites is only going to happen if management values, prioritizes safety.
The way I see it is if they don't send them to me for the classes, I tell them like, hey, this class is going on. Tell me who you can let go for a full day, send them to the class. And they don't, I'm like, all right, well, when you need them, the job is gonna stop, right? Now you no longer can use that person, you gotta figure out. And they call me, hey, who's trained on this? I'm like, well, it could have been your main guy, but you didn't wanna send him to class. And no, I will not come up tomorrow morning so that you can work on it, right? So it's
Carrots and sticks,
giving
I'm
them to
hearing.
see that point, like, okay, well, if I get them trained ahead of time, I don't have to bother America, then I don't have to stress it. And so it makes them look ahead, right? We all want them to do the look aheads so we can control the man hours. So that kind of helps too, is kind of saying, hey, listen, 8-hour class for the day, or next month they're gonna be stressed out on who can do this, because I didn't get this person trained. So it's all about that too, showing them why it is important to get rid of them for the day. And the guys in the field love it, right? I mean, management's probably like losing somebody for the day. But the guys are like, heck yes, I don't have to pull wire. I don't have to trim. I'm in for a full day, right? So it's all about how you approach it with them.
Excellent. As far as messaging in safety training is concerned, one of the things somebody was talking about was about telling a story, sharing someone else's story to make it personal. Somebody want to talk about that and their use of those kinds of anecdotes in their training?
I will. There was somebody that once told me about somebody fell off a building, and not because he didn't wear his fall protection, but it's who you work with, right? Do you trust the person that you work next to? Do you know them? So he put his fall protection on, did connect, and the person he was working with decided to unhook him. So like,
Unhook the other guy?
yeah.
Whoa!
So it's like, I use that all the time, and it's like, if I know somebody doesn't like the other person, I'm like, we should probably move them around. Just because that stuck with me, right? And so I use that, like, if you don't trust somebody or you are uncomfortable with somebody, say something, right? So it clicks with them. And I've got a lot of people say, hey, yeah, I don't feel safe doing this, and this person is not who I would like to be next to. I don't even think he'd rescue me. So it's like, okay, we'll move something around. So that was one story that stuck with me. There's a few others, but.
We're storytellers by nature,
Yes.
you know, and that's how information and knowledge has been passed down since we were, you know, and it's been mentioned that looking at a book and sitting in a classroom may not be easy for some people. They're just not drawn towards that. They don't learn that way. But when they get to sit and listen to you tell stories about how someone you care about had their lungs burned by a chemical, or how they suffered some other fate, it touches them in a completely different way. They can, it's tangible. It's something they can relate to.
And you're also telling it with passion.
True that.
Cautionary tales, they can be grim, but they also stick with you.
Yes.
That definitely, whenever we have an opportunity, I'm usually looking at my dad, the owner of Kemly, the founder. Like, you've seen this you grew up in New Jersey, you've definitely seen this. Or, you know, some of our older estimators who've probably seen something similar to it before to share their experience, and usually the younger guys are like, whoa, I had no idea, you know, right? So sticks with them.
Yeah, especially, not too long ago, we had, and it wasn't none of my guys or girls. We have a lot of women out in the field now, and it makes me so happy, but, there was a different subcontractor, one of the guys died in the border job from an overdose.
Oh,
And so I use that all the time, like, if you know your buddy has a drug addiction, any kind of addiction, it's a good thing to say something about it. Because that site was affected by it for a long time. Like, seeing that on the ground, that it will affect somebody. And so I like to bring that up, like, this is why we say something, because something could have been done, right? At Haggard, we don't fire you if you tell us that you have a problem. We actually help you get help, and your job is protected. We bring you back once we know you have kicked that habit, and you're a success story. We've had a few. So it's, you know, those stories really hit. So be a storyteller.
And steal other people's stories
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
Tony told me, where's Tony? Just left the room, told me the story of the guy, he couldn't get to wear his safety glasses over and over, and it wasn't until he made a personal contact, a connection, and identified what that person loved to do on the weekends, and that was to hop on their bike and ride. And then he was able to say, what would you do if you didn't have your eyesight? And it was a light bulb moment, you know? The light went off in the guy's head, and after that, he never had to be reminded to protect his eyes, because he imagined not being able to ride.
so that's a good segue into, I think, what's going to be our final topic today, which is accountability and getting folks to do what you're asking them to do, the carrots and the sticks. What are some of the carrots and sticks that you utilize? Because that's a great example of having somebody finally have that aha moment and, okay, I'm going to wear my PPE moving forward. Obviously, you all are doing write-ups and a consistent disciplinary policy, progressive disciplinary policy, I presume that. What other ways do you incentivize safety, either through a wag of the finger or an atta-gal, atta-boy situation?
I follow up to see if they started wearing their PPE, that they didn't wear when they got written up. And if I see them that they actually listened, we do Haggard bucks, and we have TC Span America. You can go on their website, pick what you want, send me your order, and then I get it embroidered for you with our Haggard name. Or we do like gift cards for Starbucks, because everybody needs their coffee in the morning, or the bagel, right? So we do little things like that, or we do Home Depot, anything that they can go buy a tool that they won't buy for themselves, because they're like, I make trainee money. I'm like, I know what you make. You can buy that, okay? So it's, you know, it's things like that that I like to do, or we try to do barbecues, pizza parties, just to show them, like, we appreciate that you're taking safety seriously, because like you said earlier, I can't be keeping, you have to be the one to keep you safe, right? I want to keep you safe, but I'm not there every day to be like, hey, what are you doing? Come on, you wanna go home today? So it's like having them think about that and just following up to see, okay, I wrote this guy up for no safety glasses while he's drilling, and then he got something in his eye. So I'm gonna go back randomly without him knowing and see if he's wearing his goggles. Because safety glasses don't work, right? I started making my guys do goggles because it still gets back there. So if it's connected to your face tighter, it won't get in your eye. And when I see that they're doing good, I make sure that, hey, not only did I write you up, but thank you for listening. And here's this. Now, if they use it great. If they don't, and they're like, I never get anything, I'm like, yeah, right, I still have you written down for $50 that you didn't use, so yes, you do, right? So that's how we do it.
Other thoughts, yeah.
So we do have, it's called the Be Like Dave Award. We have a guy named Dave who, he drives 5 under the speed limit. He wears his like full Harley leathers, but then has like neon pants and a vest similar to that he also wears on top of it, with like 3 flags coming off the back of his he's always, you know, buying PPE for like that, over and above PPE for his jobs, even if it's like a service call where we're swapping out a receptacle or something like that. He's very safe. So we have that, that's kind of the reward aspect, but the other half that we've started to do is to empower the guys and have a 0 penalty for bringing safety issues to us, or even saying like, this is not, I don't feel comfortable doing this, here are my reasons why, but you know, also asking for a solution at the same time. Well, how would you do it? What can you know, how can we find a solution around this? And even if it means delaying the job or pulling off the job site, in some cases, we've had that happen. I don't care if it's an apprentice or, you know, a helper or a journeyman or the, you know, project manager, whoever it might be, they have that power to pull that ripcord. And as soon as we made people realize that we are 100% behind them on that, and if something's brought to us, we've seen more and more safe behavior and more willingness to try to, you know, adhere to our guidelines and policies and stop cutting corners. Because these guys in the field, they feel like they are going to cowboy some things sometimes. And if you see something and, you know, and you realize you're the only one being unsafe, it's kind of this peer pressure thing, like, oh, I should probably get on board here.
Yeah.
Definitely has to be a value.
Yeah.
One of the things I like to do is when I commend somebody, I'll do it face to face, but then I'll always follow up with an email and I will CC their supervisor and one of the owners to say, you know, we see you, we really appreciate what you're doing. Because I think that goes a long way to publicly give somebody a handful of that girl.
Yeah, especially during stretch and flex. That was a hard buy-in, but they love it now. Just bringing up like, hey, this person, because they were paying attention to their surroundings, they didn't get hit with what's falling off the crane last week, you know? So it's, you know, during that stretch and flex, we talk about everything that's going on at the job site. And we give the person that away, hey, thanks for actually paying attention to where you're walking. And then it shows everybody like, oh, yeah, no kidding, I should probably pay attention. So it's good.
Coffee cards are something that I carry around with me all the time. And find somebody using the ladder right or whatever, just whip it out and say thank you. It'll give them an opportunity to appreciate it at that moment, but then when they pull it out at the coffee shop a week later, they're gonna stop and think about, or at least recognize why they have it. So that's 2 hits for the price of 1.
Yeah.
I'm a little discouraged that coffees cost more than $5 now.
What is that?
Definitely public praise. In our meetings with the managers, we have a section for kudos, you know, who's doing great. And if somebody brings up something else, I always go out of my way to say, hey, I heard you did this. And, you know, oh, wow, because people then are talking about positives that other people are doing. And then they're like, okay, I'm doing good, I'm getting recognized.
Yeah.
Amanda mentioned the public acknowledgements. That's another thing that I do a lot of, is using Teams and including their manager, and sometimes even one step up on an accolade of some kind. And also when I'm expecting a little more accountability, I'll do that same. And that needs to be quick, you know, it needs to be right then. It doesn't, I don't think, do much good to tell somebody on Friday that they did something awesome on Tuesday. I think if you see something rolled that you approve of on Tuesday at 9 o'clock, by 10 or 12, they had better get a word of appreciation for that. Needs to be immediate.
Nice. Well, I see we're pretty much wrapped up out of time. So I just want to thank everybody for your thoughts and your insight today, and for sharing your time with the group in-house and in the internet and for posterity because we are being recorded. So thank you all very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.